Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Game Over Beer. I'm your host, Tom Meyer. It's a simple format on Game Over Beer. Our guests will choose 3 beers and 3 games and tell us why they mean so much to them. Firstly, I'd like to say a big thank you to our official partners, Four Quarters, the UK's original arcade bar, home to authentic retro arcade machines and consoles. Now, I'm happy to say that our first guest on Game Over Beer is none other than Jonny Garrett. Now get ready for a long list of accolades. Jonny is the founder of the Craft Beer Channel, co-host of the Bubble podcast, contributor to Good Beer Hunting UK. He won Beer Writer of the Year in 2019. He also won US Beer Broadcast of the Year 2019, and is the author of 3 books, including A Year in Beer, A Beer Geek's Guide to the Seasons, released in September 2021, which we'll get a peek into at the start of the chat. A heads up, Jonny drops a C-bomb after retelling a gaming memory from his youth, and I might as well have when I ashamedly compare a brilliant brewery to an obscure adult soft drink. Please don't at me. So, without further ado, join Jonny and I as we Game Over Beer. Hello, Jonny. Welcome to Game Over Beer.
Thank you very much for having me.
Firstly, I'd just like to say a huge congratulations, because not only did you launch a new book towards the end of last year, you also had a baby. So a huge congratulations to you and your partner.
Yeah, two quite painful births for 2021, but they both got there in the end. Yeah, we're dead proud. Well, I say we're dead proud. I'm dead proud of the book and the baby. My wife is dead proud of the baby and pissed off at the book.
Amazing. Now, for those that should know but don't know about your new book, A Year in Beer, can you tell us a little bit about it and how you came to writing this book?
Yeah, definitely. So it was one of those unusual projects. You know, anybody that's tried to write a book knows that it's pretty rare for an opportunity to kind of land in your lap. But that's what happened with this one. Camera, I think, were looking for sort of new, younger writers, and they approached me and said, have you got any ideas for a book? And I said, I've got so many ideas for a book. Here's a bunch of them. And they came back and went, no, not those. And actually, they came to me saying, we wanted to do a book around seasonality. It's not really been done. I think there's one sort of proper book. I think it was even Randy Mosher might have done it, called something Beer in the Seasons or something. But they sort of thought that it would be a nice way to have a new approach at the beer book, to try and get away from the listicles and that kind of thing. And initially I was super skeptical because I was sort of thinking nobody really drinks seasonally. I don't really drink seasonally. All I could really think of was the classics of like, well, it's getting a bit dark, we'll have a stout now. Yeah. Which we all do for one pint and then go back to IPA. And then, you know, obviously there were things like Christmas beer and dry January, but yeah, I couldn't really see it. It didn't really enthuse me. But then I was like, well, I still want a book deal. So I sat down and I got an Excel spreadsheet and I put January to December in and started putting in all the events, all the moments, all the seasonal things that I could think of that were remotely related to beer.
Yeah.
And within about 10 minutes of starting to do that, I realised that actually beer is incredibly seasonal, whether it's, you know, sort of November through to March with the spontaneous brewing, lambic sort of traditions of Belgium, whether it's Christmas beer, Easter beer, whether it's lagers in summer, stouts and porters in winter, whether it's connected to food or whether it's connected to events that are happening like Oktoberfest. You know, every single month, with the possible exception of February, there is something going on that is completely linked to beer. And I think, you know, that's because beer is so ingrained in our society and in the societies of many of all of the brewing nations, really. So yeah, it then sort of took on this form of being, I guess, the tagline is A Beer Geek's Guide to the Seasons. So it's sort of assuming you know a little bit about beer, not a huge amount, but also that you're very interested in other things. So there's recipes in there of stuff that I've cooked all with beer. So the ultimate beer battered fish, porter brisket. There's puddings as well, like Pancake Day. I do a saison beer pancake, which is the recipe. I do it probably once a fortnight in my house because it's just delicious. And then also other stuff, like there's lots of travel in there. There's lots of agricultural stuff, like I go to the hop harvest, the malt harvest, and other things like sort of foraging. I go foraging with Yonder Brewing, and all these other kind of things that sort of feed into beer but slightly tangentially. And so it becomes almost a way to live. You just sort of can live a year with beer being the sort of the lens that you live it by. And hopefully people will sort of read the whole thing in one go, but also dip in and out depending on what month it is.
Yeah, that's great, because obviously I think for a lot of people, if they saw the book, they're probably assuming, okay, this is just going to tell me what I should be drinking in which month. But then it's so great, as you say, to have those recipes and then looking at the foraging, looking at the hop harvest, and having a kind of a much better understanding of what a year looks like to brewers, to hop growers, malters, and everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, even if we aren't drinking seasonally, and I make this distinction in the book, there's drinking seasonally and there's brewing seasonally. And you can have, say it's a year-round beer, say it's Proper Job by St. Austell. You know, that is pretty much the same beer year-round. But every single year, the quality, the flavours, the aromas from their hops change. Every single year, the diastatic power of their malt changes. The colour of the kilning might change a little bit. So they are having to account for seasonal and human change every single year to try and give you a beer that doesn't actually change with the seasons. So there's still a seasonal element in every single beer that's made. And a lot of what I learned through writing the book, and a lot of what I hope people learn through reading the book, is that sometimes you don't want a seasonal change. You want, you know, your Don Soco Hellas probably to taste the same every time you have it, but you almost certainly don't want your mixed firm saisons to taste the same every time you have them. You want that seasonal element in there. You want to bring that back, because I think one of the biggest changes that's happened in the last sort of 100 years is that loss of seasonal drinking. You know, globalization means that we can drink pretty much any beer we want at any time of year, and we can store it in a fridge and it'll always be crisp and cold and fresh.
Yeah.
And so turning the clocks back a little bit and going, well, actually, I will drink this beer that was brewed at this time of year or designed to be drunk at this time of year, because that might connect me a little bit more to the nature that I'm in, the surroundings I'm in, the situation I'm in, the food that I'm drinking, the people that I'm with. So yeah, the whole book is kind of embraces the fact that you can just get a New England IPA whenever the hell you want, and it will probably work for you whether it's Christmas Day or the height of summer. But equally, if on Christmas Day you have a St. Bernardus, and then the height of summer you have a crispy little table beer from your local brewery that's still dripping with condensation from the canning line, then they're going to be more interesting experiences.
Yeah. Well, let's move away from the book, just so you don't give absolutely everything away that's in it. I'll start by asking you, how hard was it to pick these 3 beers and 3 games?
You know, the beers were dead easy. The beers promoted the book. The games were significantly harder. I don't know whether you're going to ask me how I got into gaming, but I'm going to tell you, which was my dad actually used to work in IT. He worked for Olivetti, who made, if not maybe one of the first ever home computers.
Right.
And my dad helped bring that to market. So we had a computer in our house for as long as I can remember. I never remember. It used to be that it was this big fucking thing down in the dining room. And then, you know, now it's my dad's on his Galaxy tablet in front of the TV. But we always had it, and we always had, you know, Ataris and all that kind of stuff, because my dad was fascinated by it all. And so picking the games was quite easy, because I have been into gaming since I could push buttons on a keyboard, basically. I used to play Pong on my TV, and then I used to watch my brother playing. Yeah, I actually, the first game that I picked, Monkey Island, I spent the first year or two just watching my brother play, because I didn't know how to. And the puzzles in that game are fucking hard even today.
Yeah.
So yeah, I watched gaming for a long, long time. And that means that Monkey Island is an incredibly formative part of who I am, because some of my earliest memories are that game. And then I took a huge break from gaming. I don't think... I had a Wii at university, and we mostly played PGA golf on it and Wii tennis, and that was about it. And then I got back into it only a couple of years ago, buying a PS4 and starting to explore that. So... yeah, basically I picked 2 games that formed my entire personality, and then another game that got me addicted at a very bad time, because my career was just taking off.
Yeah, perfect. And I think the game that you picked as well, you really need to put some hours into, right? So obviously we'll talk about that later, but what a time to have got back into gaming.
Yeah, these open worlds where I just basically leave my own open world and go into another one that's possibly even bigger. Yeah.
Great. So let's start by talking about beer number 1. What have you chosen and why?
So I've chosen Donzoko Helles, Northern Helles, sorry, to give it its proper name. The reason why, I mean, there's lots of reasons why. Firstly, it's an absolutely amazing beer.
Yeah.
It's the kind of beer that I've been waiting for years to come out in the UK. It was a beautiful lager, but we already had some beautiful lagers. But what it was it was a beautiful lager that was unlike any other lager made in the UK. So there were lots of derivative kind of lagers being made in the UK where we tried to copy German brewing traditions like Thornbridge, Lucas, and Bayern before that are just incredible beers, but they are homages to that part of the world. Whereas Northern Helles, with the lactic culture that Reese has, that he is very, very proud of, that gives it this glorious, rich lemon character and sort of perfect drinkability. The New Zealand hops that he uses to give it more floralness. I should know that as a beer writer. And then, just the slightly elevated bitterness that doesn't stop it being really drinkable. In fact, it increases the drinkability, but still kind of reminds you that this isn't just a straight up Helles, because Helles, the IBUs are down at like 15, 20. It's a pretty sweet beer.
Yeah.
But Northern Helles has a definite hoppy finish to it, and I really enjoy that. So it's just, my dream for the British beer industry. If somebody said, where do you want British beer to land? Where do you want it to sort of settle after the craft beer revolution? I'd be like, a great local lager brewery in every single city.
Yeah.
And we're getting quite close to that. And each of them being different, like it is in Bavaria, where you can go to Nuremberg, Bamberg, Munich and get entirely different beers. That's what I want for the UK beer scene. And I think that Northern Helles was the first step towards that.
Yeah, it's funny you say, because I remember like first trying to introduce some people into craft beers and like them kind of thinking, oh, let me try a craft lager then. And then I think at the time, some of them, some of the breweries were still fairly new, still fairly getting used to brewing. Obviously, lagers are very hard beer to make. To kind of, you can't hide any mistakes. The idea is it's balanced. And then them saying, oh, this is way too hoppy. Fast forward to now, where you've got so many craft breweries that are doing lagers or focusing on lagers, and just the quality is completely different.
Yeah, and there's also, because the quality got much higher, there is also the issue that if you make a really beautiful Helles, then there's a slight argument as to why would you drink that local craft one at £6 a can when Paulana and Hacker are over here at maybe £3 or £4 a can. So it's I think even within the world of lager, which people think is extremely small, and it's fucking not, it's huge. There's tens of different styles of lager. Diversity is really, really important, and I think we're lucky to have somebody like Reese making like really idiosyncratic lager, and then we're also very lucky to have people like Lost and Grounded who make incredibly dialed in, incredibly traditional beer, but then Alex forces his it has to be dry, it has to be bitter onto every style. So he's brewed a Helles and made it dry and bitter. And like, well, it's not really a Helles, is it, Alex? He's like, well, it's got some honeyed character. What more do you fucking want? This is my style. And while the traditionalist in me was like, but it's not a Helles, and should be the same with Reese, I still really I prefer that. I prefer that we had our own approaches.
Great stuff. Right, so let's move on to your first game.
Yeah, so first game, as I said, is Monkey Island. I still think it's probably my favourite game. I still crack it out and play it every couple of years, and it still makes me laugh. It still surprises me and catches me unawares. And there's frequent moments where it sends shivers down my spine with how brilliant it is. It's one of those works of genius where you don't really know where to start or how to break it down or how to explain to people just how kind of special it is. But the way that I try to get that across is I try to sort of link it to me. So I love wordplay, I love writing, I love comedy, and all of that comes from Monkey Island. All of it comes from the punning work that you do during the sword battles. It comes from having to solve puzzles like the riddle about the red herring.
Yeah.
And spending hours trying to get that fucking red herring from the seagull out the back of the kitchen. And it really has informed sort of who I am, and also created a real sense of adventure. Like, even though the graphics are so dated, still there's not really a game that I can think of, certainly from back then, that has the atmosphere that, say, like that Arrival on Monkey Island does. the beating sun, the chasing the monkey around the forest, the cannibal scenes, or like back on Melee Island when you go and see Stan at the used ship emporium and his character and the lights and the vending machine behind him and the music that plays. It's just one of those things that it completely sucks you in with the characters and with the vibe that it has. Which I believe, interestingly, vibe-wise, they were trying to recreate Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland, which is hysterical because obviously the other thing that came out of that is Pirates of the Caribbean with Johnny Depp. And you're like, these two things cannot be more different from the same sort of inspiration source. But yeah, so I mean, I grew up watching my brother play it, and then once I was old enough to sort of use a mouse effectively, I started playing it and started getting flummoxed by all of the puzzles again. I'd love to say it taught me logical thinking. It definitely hasn't. I'm still shocking at puzzle games.
Just clicking absolute everywhere to make every piece. Just click it everywhere. Hope that something sticks.
Yeah, but then you got to do it in the right order. Yeah, so it's a really formative part, and you know, I still, when I'm out and about, you still see people occasionally doing really oblique references to the game. And I have serious stranger danger, but anybody that has any kind of Monkey Island related merch on them or makes a Threepwood based gag, I will talk to that person forever because they're clearly, I think most people my age, you know, mid-30s, have probably had that similar experience with that game as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely classed within that, and I remember me and one of my friends playing this together. Apart from being absolutely annoyed at the puzzles and just couldn't figure out what we need to do, and you know, this was before, you know, you could just go on Google and be like, how do I do this, and find a walkthrough. You're just there for absolute hours trying to find it.
It was back when you had to buy a book.
Yes,
and you
exactly.
had to wait for somebody to write that book.
Yeah. I think I had the same for Final Fantasy VII as well, actually. Just that, trying to do the completion of it and just being like, I'm not going to do this unless I have a book and it tells me step by step how to do this. But I think, yeah, Monkey Island's one of those games that I'd love to play for the first time again. I mean, it has been a while that I probably would have forgotten a lot of the puzzles, I hope. Because that'd be just such an amazing experience to go back and play that again for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, even if you do remember the puzzles, there's still, you know, like making the potion that you have to do once you're on the ship. You know, I've played that part 50 times. I could probably tell you the recipe, but I think I'll still mess it up a couple of times. Yeah. It's still got the joy, and it's still... We all know that computer games now have got extraordinarily good at telling stories. A lot of them are almost films where you're sort of guiding when things happen, and to some extent what happens. But you know, you're part of this film.
Yeah,
Monkey Island actually is a lot like that as well. You know, there is, because you can't really die, you can't fuck up the game, you can't change the game. You know, you get confronted by puzzle after puzzle after puzzle. Whereas most modern games, like if you get stuck at a puzzle, you fuck off and do something else. You have to follow this narrative. This narrative is already set, and you're already wanting to find out, you know, whether you end up with Elaine, whether Stan does rip you off. He definitely does. And all of these things that are just a miraculous story that you want to live again and again, like an old book that you know of by heart. I could tell you the first page of the first Harry Potter, but I'd still read it. Even with the fucking revelations,
yeah.
You know, these things that are part of my character that I could, you know, just keep reliving and reliving.
Great, so that's our first beer and first game. So let us know what your second beer is and why you chose it.
So my second beer is Verdant. Verdant as a whole, generally, but also Verdant Even Sharks Need Water, which is one of my favourite IPAs, certainly my favourite New England IPA that's made in the UK.
Yeah.
And I wanted to pick that because we all have moments in craft beer and in gaming where something like a light goes on and something changes. And you know, you don't necessarily know at the time, but looking back, you know that nothing else was quite the same again.
Yeah.
And it wasn't actually Even Sharks Need Water that actually gave me that moment, but happily it's captured on camera. It's one of the joys of having a YouTube channel, is that most of the amazing moments that you experience in beer are actually caught on camera. And we were doing every year we do a big in 2020, 21, 22, in which we take a guess at what the trends and the big breweries are going to be that year. And we picked Verdant back in 2016, I think, where nobody really knew who they were. and they just released Roy I Want a Hilux, a New England Pale Ale. And you can see me and Brad, like I'd already tried it, tried a different beer off camera. I think I tried Headband. And you can see me and Brad drink it and be like, holy fuck. Where has this come from? Like, I'd been to Treehouse, I'd been to Trillium, so I'd had those kind of beers, but I'd never had them made that way in the UK, and I'd never had them anywhere near as good. So Verdant have always had a special place in my heart because that was when I realised that New England IPA was coming, that it was beautiful, that it could be done in the UK outside of the US. You didn't need to be right by the hop farms. You didn't need a certain water or a certain malt supply or anything. It was, the magic wasn't the ingredients, it was the process. And that's why New England IPA is both so joyous but also so repeatable. It's because it's process. So yeah, then when I tried Even Sharks Need Water, that was a peak for me. I don't think that there's been a better New England IPA made in this country since. Not that I've tasted on a regular basis. Maybe there have been some one-offs that have blown me away, but nothing that I can get my hands on pretty regularly. So I wanted that beer in there as just to tell people that's, if you want to try a New England IPA, the New England IPA, I think that's the one you should try. But also because it was a formative experience, which is what Game 2 is for me.
Yeah, it's so funny you speak about Verdant, how it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, I think I was working at a bottle shop at the time, and I remember a Verdant can coming on the shelves, and generally what we did, a new beer come in, we'd crack one open and try it, and we had a very similar moment. We're like, wow, who is this again? Who made this? And then, as another Verdant can was coming in, you do the same again. You'd have to try it, and it was just amazing how this brewery out of nowhere just started creating this style, and obviously, not the origins of starting this style, but definitely one of the ones that put themselves on the map for that style at the time. And obviously that style has now exploded, and as you said, you can get them all year round if you want to, but if you want to get one that is consistent and you know is going to be pretty awesome every time, Verdant's going to be your best bet.
Yeah, in terms of consistency for New England IPA, I think only Daya could compete with that. And what's great is that both of them have signature flavors. So you could tell a Daya and a Verdant apart, no problem. Which is often the problem with New England IPA. They all use the same yeast, the same hops, the same malts, the same processes. Whereas both of those guys have a distinctive house yeast, so distinctive that Verdant have actually managed to sell the rights of theirs, and everybody else wants to use it now. That when you're having those beers, and I think that's an incredible achievement as well, particularly to hang on to that even today. So it seems kind of tired, and craft beer moves on very quickly to sort of the new hype guys. But anybody come to the UK, go, what beers do I need to track down? If you like IPA, I'm never going to say anyone but Verdant first.
Absolutely.
Because they just can't be beaten.
Great stuff. Right, so that's beer number 2. So now let's move on to your second game. What have you chosen?
Yeah, so I've chosen Ultima Online, which was a Momoporg, massive multiplayer online role-playing game. Momoporg.
Yeah, there we go. He did it.
Which I became genuinely obsessed with in my mid-teens. I remember there was a guy at school called Sam Withnell, I think, something like that, and he was going on and on about it because he knew I loved games. We both read. I think I was a PC Zone guy, and he was a PC Gamer guy, and he was going on and on and on about it, and I was just like, I just don't see the appeal. Like, already graphics had moved on by the time he discovered that game, and I didn't really understand how immersive a world could be once it was online only, because they didn't really exist back then. We're talking 1998, 1999 maybe. So these games didn't truly exist sort of in the wider world, and I really didn't get it. And I must have mentioned it to my parents or something because they bought it for me.
Oh, wow.
I think not realising that there was a subscription to pay. So you pay 30 quid and then it was like 6 quid a month as well. And from the moment I logged in, I remember I logged in, I created my character. You started in the capital of Britannia, which I think was called Britannia, if I remember correctly. And I walked out of the gates of the city with my sword in hand, ready to have fun, and it got immediately murdered by a human person. Another someone around the world, I think probably followed me out the gates, like saw, new guy, just logged in, He's going to walk out those gates and I'm going to fucking do it. And that's exactly what happened. And I cried to my mum because my mum still likes telling this story. She likes sort of going like, we thought we bought you this awesome gift. And within 5 minutes, you were crying because, she'd probably been protecting me for 12, 13 years from these kinds of people. And then she'd bought me a box that directly connected me with the cunts that are out there in the world waiting for you. And it was a real wake-up moment for me that the world is not necessarily a kind, gentle place like your home in Oxford and the school that you go to. So, yeah, that was really formative, and it toughened me up in the online world. Maybe it's why I can take the trolling of having a YouTube account. But, from that moment, I've never sort of had a game that's been as high stakes since then. Where anybody could turn around and kill you at any point. Where the glitches in the game, I mean, this was still like dial-up internet times, so you could be fighting a dragon, lose connection, game over. But I made only online, but some incredible friends through it. I remember you could buy a house and build a house in Ultima Online, but only on certain days. Like every year they do a release so that just the whole of the land wasn't covered in houses. And I'd been saving up for like a year ready for house buying day. And I'd come up like 1,000 gold coins short, having saved 39,000. And I just sort of messaged my mate on IQ Messenger and said, I haven't got the money. And he just gave me the money. Just like, there you go. Sorry to hear that, but here it is. And yeah, he built me a house, and I'd never met Doom Lord in my life, but it was a lovely antidote to the bastard that murdered me in my first 5 minutes. A year in, I'd got a friend who was just like, yeah, just it's 1,000 gold coins, but which I guess in my head is quite a lot. He was just like, yeah, have it.
Oh wow.
And we used to go on adventures together. We used to go. Yeah, it sounds ridiculous to say, but we'd go slay dragons. We'd go to the Orc Fort and just spend hours battling and talking. We didn't have headsets back then, so it was all through, like, you type in what you said would appear above your character. So fighting and chatting a little bit, and just having the kind of adventures that you never really could as a 13-year-old kid in the evenings. And I spent 3 or 4 hours on that every night. Made great friends. Never hung out with Sam Withnell, not once, despite him giving me the tip. And yeah, it was just the most incredible experience to be able to escape so completely as a teen from the world that you lived in, and to be able to, because I was a fantasy reader, I loved all that kind of stuff, like I've already mentioned, like Harry Potter, but also I can't remember the name of the writer now, but I love sort of Dungeon and Dragon stories. Obviously loved Lord of the Rings, and living that out with actual other humans was living in the future as far as I was concerned.
I was going to say, can you imagine the plot twist if it turns out Doomlord was the one who mugged you at the start and felt so bad that he then took you along for the rest of your time there to make up for it?
It could be. This is the amazing thing, like, because I don't know whether it still happens in online role-playing games now. I haven't played any since Ultima Online, but lots of times people would take the role-playing elements so seriously that they would develop, obviously, narratives for themselves. So the characters that they created wasn't just, this is his guy's name and I'm going to start my story now.
Yeah.
They give the stories that came before. So maybe Doomlord, he was the guy that murdered me. And in his story, he was, from that moment, from the guilt, he was forever determined to make it up. And when I just took the 1,000 coins, I was like, oh, thanks, Doomlord. He was like karma achieved.
Yeah.
And he logged off then, quit Ultima Online. And was like, yeah, game completed.
Yeah, quest completed.
Exactly.
He's like, they named me Doomlord, but I don't want to be a Doomlord.
Exactly.
I need redemption.
Sort of, yeah. His name told him how he had to be, but then one day he realised he didn't have to be Doomlord. He had a choice. So there you go. Now we've given me a legend in Ultima Online. I was murdered on my first day out of the gates, but I came back to become friends with my murderer and to let him achieve ascension to being not a Doom Lord, but a probably grooming lord. I don't know how old he was, but something very different.
Yeah. I think that's where we swiftly move on to beer number 3. What have you chosen?
So beer number 3, I've chosen Annie, which is a mixed fermentation saison by Yonder. It's an unashamed attempt at talking about the book again. In the like I said, I went foraging with Yonder, and it's probably my favourite probably my favourite chapter in the book. It's a wonderful story of a day spent with him and actually Gareth, the head brewer of Daya, foraging for elderflower behind a leisure centre in Somerset.
Of course, where all great elderflower is grown.
Well, this is it. This is what I talk about in the book. I'm like, I never thought you could have so much fun in a leisure centre car park unless you were in the back of a car. And it was a really magical day where I learned a huge amount about the world around me, like all this stuff that we just see as like the hedgerows of a path or the edges of a field are either edible or poisonous or interesting for some other reason. And walks with Stu, who founded Yonder, you're never not really learning. And the joy is that he's never not really learning as well. So every time you ask him a question you can't answer, he'll come back to you a couple of days later going, I found the answer to... That's not how he sounds at all, but he'll find the answers because that's what sort of drives him. And Annie is one of my favourite beers of theirs. It's mixed fermentation. They release it once a year. It's sort of their anniversary saison, so I think it is aged for a year in barrel, and throughout the year they'll add certain stuff that they've foraged, plums, sumac, other herbs, and it's supposed to be a flavour of that year. And I couldn't think of a better beer to sort of sum up what I wanted to do with a year in beer, because every year is going to taste different. We all go through these cycles, even through the seasons. There's probably been a year where I haven't had a single porter, but I've had 20 imperial stouts. And, the flavours will change every year through our tastes and through what we discover and what we eat and where we are. So I wanted a beer that, changes every year, but also talks about the fact that the seasons, they fluctuate and they change, but they still produce the same fruits at roughly the same time of year, and you can put your expression onto it as much as you want. And Yonder are an interesting one now, particularly recently, because they've started doing pastry sours, pastry stouts even. I think because just the business model wasn't quite working, they weren't achieving any growth. They couldn't be the sort of the local business, the local employer that they wanted to be by just making these very unusual, complex forage sours, and I think it's a real shame that breweries have to do that. And I had a little vent on Twitter this morning, in fact, about the fact that we'll turn our noses up at a raspberry beer made with leftover bread unless we call it a jam roly-poly beer, in which case we'll be like, this is the best beer I've ever had, even if because all of Yonder's beers are made with their own house culture and stuff. There's no quick souring going on. They're still deliciously complex beers. Why did I get onto that? I've just gone on a rant there. Sorry.
No, it's funny. It's funny you say that, actually, because then my thought when I first had Yonder and looking at some of the ingredients they were adding, I was almost like it's the equivalent of, not to say that Tiny Rebel is trying to push that nostalgia and those flavors are all relating back to something, like rhubarb and custard and things like that. It kind of felt like they were like the Ribena or Vimto, and then Yonder was like the Schlur. Like it's like an adult version that you could kind of get away with. And whether people... Is Schlur still a thing? Will people get the Schlur reference? I don't know.
Even if it is, I'm not sure it's a compliment.
But I felt like they were still using ingredients, like you say, like Tiny Rebel might put loads of blueberries into a beer and call it something silly. But then Yonder were doing it in a different way, as you're saying, like with the foraging and things like that. And that's something I really enjoyed. Obviously, you're not a kid when you're drinking these beers, but you feel like you're a bit more of an adult, to enjoy those beers and have more understanding of that process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real issue, I think, in beer. And you have to be careful with this statement because beer should be fun, but beer should also challenge the drinkers a little bit, because if you don't challenge a drinker a little bit, they're not going to grow. They're not going to want to find new things. It's very, very easy just to drink a very sweet, sugary, syrup-laden beer, however much they fermented that syrup out.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be much of an experience. You're going to drink that one and go, yeah, that was all right, and you're going to move on to the next one. When you drink something the Yonder pastry ones included, because they are made, mixed fermentation and do have real complexity behind them. A lot of them. Some of them are very pastry. You can... it's something that you'll always remember. I'll always remember the first time that I had a sip of Annie when I went down to see Yonder. I'll always remember the first time I had Trunk of Funk, which is their Flanders Red, in which they throw just about every dark berry that they can find throughout the season in there. These are beers that, can be challenging, can be unusual, can be, vary year to year or even week to week, even in bottle. But they're beers that will make you fall more and more in love with beer Whereas when you go down the nostalgia route too far, all you're really doing is falling back in love with the flavors that you had as a kid. And that's a lot of fun. But I think you need a balance of both in beer, and I think sometimes the balance is entirely skewed.
Yes, definitely agree. Right, so that brings us on to your third game. What have you picked for that?
So at second attempt, I picked Horizon Zero Dawn.
Amazing.
So yeah, like I said, I stopped gaming for about a decade. I think I lived with my 4 best friends for most of my 20s, and none of them are gamers at all. So I think that was a major reason behind it. But I think also I was very busy. I had a day job, and then I had initially a restaurant blog. That's how I used to scratch the sort of the creative itch, because I was a sub-editor at a property magazine. And then I got a job working for Jamie Oliver, which was much more creative and much more fun. But then I started the craft beer channel as a side to that. So I was always incredibly busy in my late 20s and replacing probably a very unsuccessful love life with a pretty successful work life. And so I never had time for gaming. And then I met my wife, we settled down, we moved in together, and suddenly I found myself with a bit of time, particularly when my wife had gone to bed. And I saw an advert for Red Dead Redemption. And me and my wife love cowboys. It's a very childish obsession we have. But we've been to Texas. We've been riding through hill country and sort of lived that dream of being in a log cabin on a ranch.
Wow.
And yeah, I was like, I need to play this game so badly that I'm going to get back into gaming. And I said it. I think I knew what was about to happen, but my wife definitely didn't. I said, I'm going to buy a PS4 and I'm going to buy Red Dead Redemption. And she was like, looked at me like, it's like, yeah, cool. Like, you can do what you want. It's your money, it's your time. Why are you asking me?
You're an adult.
Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, when she'd barely seen me, she was like, oh, now I see why you asked. But happily, I mean, with Red Dead Redemption, like the story in that game is so strong that she ended up watching it like a film. And actually, when I completed the game, she was out. And I texted her saying, I'm about to complete Red Dead. You need to come home. And she came home. That was the extent to which she needed to see the end. But yeah, the game that I've actually picked was the second game that I bought off after Red Dead. Once I finished Red Dead, I literally just Googled other open world games like Red Dead Redemption, and up came Horizon Zero Dawn. I think I'd also seen Matt Curtis, the beer writer, mention it as well as one of his favourite games. And from a minute in, I was hooked. I loved the concept, the hook. I loved this glorious mix of incredible technology with super basic weapons. I loved the idea of this one super strong female character fighting robots that are literally hundreds of times her size through really clever use of different combats, of laying traps, of all this kind of stuff. And it sort of appealed to the Monkey Island lover in me, where, you know, when you're fighting those big guys, it wasn't just a fight scene, it was a puzzle. Each one had its strengths and its weaknesses, and so you'd puzzle it out, then still fail about 10 times, and then finally you'd absolutely nail it. And it was one of the most sort of satisfying combat games I'd played beforehand and I've played since. And the fact that there's a sequel or an expansion, I guess, is it a sequel? I think technically,
yeah,
coming out is like the most exciting. You know, if they released Red Dead Redemption 3 tomorrow, I'd still be like, yeah, but when's Horizon Zero Dawn 2? And again, it was just that story as well of essentially the end of the world and the people that remain, which is just one of those stories that will forever endure in popular culture, because it's a question that we all ask ourselves, like, what would we do if we were those people? What will it look like when it happens? Because it has to happen, right? The world has to end at some point, whether it's in 100 years because of climate change or 10 million years. You know, at some point the sun is going to swallow the earth. So it's one of those stories that we know will come true. We're just guessing at how it's going to happen. And that was super thrilling as well to see the scale of it. I mean, Ultra Online was a huge game, and you could get lost in it for hours. I used to really enjoy just picking a point on the map and walking there to find out what was there. And it was always either nothing or a troll. Sorry, an actual troll, not an online troll. And, you know, I thought that was epic in scale. But once you start playing these open world games, because I hadn't had the 10 years, well, more than 10 years since I'd played something like Ultima Online, like pushing 15 years of game development, of story development, of concept development, I went from Ultima Online thinking that was a big game to walking out in Red Dead and then Horizon Zero Dawn and being like, what the fuck? This is bigger than England. Yeah, Red Dead would take, if you just walked, Red Dead would take you, I don't know, probably 10 hours to walk from one corner of the map to the other. And that blew my mind as well, just spending hours just literally just exploring, finding those sub-quests. And I just couldn't have been more blown away by the scale of it, but also how they managed to guide you down these stories, and really compelling stories. And I love that computer games increasingly start with the story, and then they go, well, how do we sort of turn this into a compelling gameplay situation? I think it's really magic that we sort of landed there, and I'm both excited and terrified by how far VR is going to take us in that regard.
Yeah, it's funny talking about the story of this game as well, because I remember when I first started playing this, it just being like, you see these naive characters, like obviously they don't know what came before them. There's very little they know. And you're here obviously, well, I know because I'm living in it. This is how the world was.
Yeah.
And you're just watching these characters, you're watching Aloy kind of learn about it and discover all these things, and you just like, in your mind's like, oh, what did we do? How did we end the world? And you're just watching her discover that. And it's funny you mentioned Red Dead Redemption, talking about this game as well, because I actually played Horizon Zero Dawn before playing Red Dead Redemption 2. And what was really funny when I first started playing Red Dead Redemption 2 was I was on my horse and kind of, you know, riding around, and I didn't realize it, but I was constantly looking around, and I was almost like waiting for these creatures to come out. I was kind of so in that frame of mind of Horizon Zero Dawn. I was like expecting,
where are the robots?
Yeah, I was like constantly looking around like, oh, where are they? And realizing, oh no, I'm okay. I can just carry on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Red Dead is very much an adventure game, and that was one of the things that I really loved about it. The only thing that I think it really had over Horizon Zero Dawn is Horizon Zero Dawn would constantly remind you that you were playing a game. You know, all these things on the map, when you saw somebody who had a quest, there'd be an exclamation mark on top of them and stuff like that. Whereas Red Dead, you know, there was none of that. It was just like, if you walk past a person, they might start talking to you. It might turn into a quest, and it was properly like, no, you've got to work for this quest if you want it. And I tried to be one of those people that's like a completist. So when I completed it, I'd done, I don't know, about 89% of the game.
Yeah.
And I remember completing, I remember like the final scenes happening and being like, this can't be the end, because my save says I'm only 88% of the way through. And that was another thing where I was super naive. I didn't realize that games had started doing that, like the golden nuggets. No, what is it? Like the little hidden stuff. Hidden nuggets. Stop saying nuggets. All these little things that you still had to do to get 100% completion. And I tried to do that and spent hours on YouTube videos trying to, you know, there was I think there's a vampire sub-story in Saint Denis, and I just could not find this vampire. I'm just like, well, I'm just going to give up then. It's not part of the plot. Whereas, you know, in Horizon Zero Dawn, you'd find what you needed to find because it was right there on the fucking map. And in some ways, that was glorious. It meant that there was always structure. But with Red Dead, like you say, you never knew what was going to hit you, and you didn't have robots hitting you. But occasionally, you would have what were the Irish guys, or the Lemoyne Raiders, or whoever it would. They might still come out and get you.
Yeah.
They're not robots, but they've got shotguns.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean they're both, you know, in some ways very similar games and had strengths and weaknesses. But it was, you know, I've never related to a computer game character like I related to Arthur. But I've never really got behind a character and never really wanted to invest in that subplot. You know, when I was a teen, probably because I was a teen, you'd skim through all the fucking text. You know, you'd be like, blah, 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 blah. And I even did it, like, I went back and I started playing Skyrim, and I couldn't quite handle the amount of backstory that there was. Yeah. But with Horizon Zero Dawn, I was reading everything. I was almost more excited about finding those little voice notes that were left around all over the place. More excited at finding that than sort of finding the next... the next key to the puzzle or the next monster. It was literally hunting down a story, which was totally, well, I would say totally new to me. I mean, it was quite similar to Monkey Island. You know, you go around and you talk to people, and they'll color in this world for you, and probably help you understand different puzzles even better.
Yeah, I think that point you made about, you know, that kind of completionist in you as well. I mean, it was definitely one of those games where you do so much, you try to do the odds and sods that are around, And then you get to a point, I think, especially with Red Dead, where you're like, I'm no longer having fun. I'm just trying to complete the game. I'm trying to do something really difficult. And yet, I think what I found with Horizon Zero Dawn, it wasn't too far off of the kind of main quests and things that you were doing, the side quests, that you were quite happy to do them. It felt part of the world. It felt part of the story a lot more. I had a lot more fun trying to complete that to as much percent as I could as with Red Dead, which, you know, you really have to look in every nook and cranny to try and complete that game, just trying to find stuff. And there's no way you're doing that without some form of walkthrough or, you know, spending one day specifically looking for a certain thing just to complete it. But I wouldn't say I'd have as much fun if I was just like, right, I now need to hit 100% on this, and then just try and do it by myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most fun I could have in Red Dead was actually forgetting that there was a game, you know, and just adventuring. And you know, if you ended up doing some quests, great, but it was just so much fun to sort of wander around. The actual hunting element was deeply frustrating, whereas Horizon Zero Dawn, yeah, I'd just ride out and find a quest and see what happened. The same way that I played the Assassin's Creed games as well, where it's just like it's sort of a quest hunt. Even if it's an open world, it's a quest hunt. And
yeah,
Red Dead, for better or for worse, was more of a, what are you going to do then? Which led to it occasionally sort of grinding to a halt for a little bit, or particularly the super frustrating thing. We had it in GTA as well, where quests would only appear at certain times of day.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I know you're doing this so that you don't have that thing where you sort of walk into a cutscene and suddenly it's night, which looks ridiculous and takes you out at the moment. But equally, God damn it, waiting or just riding around for 10 minutes till it's dark. It's such a banal thing to have to do. I mean, now we're just bitching about tiny technicalities in what has taken hundreds of thousands of people hours to put together.
Yeah, I say I can't really complain about Red Dead in the sense that I definitely spent half an hour once just fishing for no apparent reason, not for any quest. And I had to kind of realise, like, what am I doing? I'm in a game that has all these different quests in, all these amazing things, and I'm just stood on a boat fishing.
You know, doing stuff that you could do in real life, but you're doing it on a computer. And I've never understood that kind of deeply involved sim thing. Like, for stuff like flight sim, sure, like, you probably won't be allowed to fly a plane.
Yeah.
That's probably not going to happen, so knock yourself out with that sim. But, like, driving sims, fishing sims, you're like, pick up a rod and get out there. So the fact that the game would try to encourage you by saying it's not 100% complete until you've caught this fucking fish was deeply frustrating to me, because I was like, if I want to catch a fucking fish, I'll call up my very dull friend Dave and go, look, I know I've been taking the piss out of you for nigh on 34 years about fishing, but I've decided I need to catch a fish. So, yeah, I've probably just got loads of people's backs up, because I know that sim games... What's the truck driving one where you can just drive around Europe, and it's like one of the most downloaded sim games of all time. So people clearly love it, and it's clearly escapist.
Yeah, and it's farming.
Yeah, farming, yeah. It's, you know, there's clearly a mass demand for that. I think for a lot of people it's meditative, or it's like slow TV, or it's living out a little fantasy that they won't be able to do. You know, if you've had kids, you're probably not going to become a truck driver or just go for a drive for 4 days.
Yeah.
So I apologise to those people. It's probably a situation that I'm not really thinking of. But yeah, I never ever got into the fishing or even the hunting of Red Dead. And I used to find there were some sort of hunty kind of quests in Horizon Zero Dawn where you had to go kill a certain amount of animals and stuff like that. I was just like, I want to fight a big monster. I want to puzzle out and fight a big monster, or I want to listen to people in their last days telling each other they love each other, or that they think they found the solution but nobody's listening, or all these kind of amazing stuff. Or, like you say, all those little teasers where, you know, it was an amazing little game conceit, which maybe they didn't even think about, where you know more about the stuff that they're discovering than the character does. It's pretty amazing to come up with that conceit, whether it's on purpose or not. It made for a very different feel to a game.
I've just remembered, because I think I saw someone tweet this the other day, and it was something about how they were teaching robots to eat organic matter. And I think I messaged back saying, isn't this how Horizon Zero Dawn started? And I was just like, just reading it, being like, surely not. Have we gone that far around? Someone's possibly played the game and been like, maybe we can make this happen. They'd be like, no. Play the game, see what happens.
See how that pans out. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's well documented that, you know, satire is dead because it now happens in the real world, and probably to some extent science. I mean, well, no, that's not true, because actually it's always been that way. You know, science fiction has very often predicted science. Science fiction has very often predicted technology.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just another case of that. But yeah, for the same reason that hopefully we never invent a time machine, perhaps we shouldn't be feeding plant matter to robots.
And I think that's the last line of the podcast.
It's the first time a beer podcast has ever ended with that, that's for sure.
Well, Jonny, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for talking through your picks. I'll mention more in the notes. Please let us know how people can find out more about you, Craft Beer Channel, and your new book.
Yeah, so you can get the book. It's called A Year in Beer by Jonny Garrett. You can get that from the Camera website or from the Big Bad A place, or increasingly lots of local bottle shops and stuff like that. And then, yeah, my main job is I run the Craft Beer Channel, which is a YouTube channel that makes documentaries, mini films, and vlogs all about beer. You can find that at youtube.com/Craft Beer Channel, or just go to the search bar on YouTube and stick it in, and you'll find us. You'll find us.
Thanks so much, Jonny. Thanks for coming on and chatting with us.
Not at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonny Garrett, for joining me. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm off to find out where I can play Monkey Island again. To find out who will be on next week's show and to keep up to date with any news, events and competitions, please make sure to follow us at Game Over Beer on Instagram and Twitter. Everything I'm doing at Game Over Beer is to help raise funds for mental health charities. So if you have a moment, please donate at ko-fi.com/Game Over Beer. That's ko-fi.com/Game Over Beer. Thank you for listening and join me again next week as we Game Over Beer.